Hey, Pressure Pals, thanks for tuning in. This is a special Firewatch Spoilercast. Firewatch is a short game, only about 3.5 hours long, and that's why this is going to be a short Spoilercast. I am joined, as always, by Steve, Firewatch loving Cuff, or maybe he doesn't. We have not spoken about this game at all to each other. You've heard my opinions. I've definitely been interested to hear yours. Firewatch, you played on the PlayStation 4?
I did indeed.
I also played on the PlayStation 4. Were there any updates to that game?
Yeah. Right after I downloaded it, they downloaded a patch, and then I think it downloaded another one, so it's version like 1.024 or something right now.
I played it without any updates, or at least no updates beyond the very first day. There wasn't anything out there. I last played it a week ago. I played through it twice, and I did a video on it.
Yeah, and I think you said that you ran into some like technical hiccups.
I guess we can get that out of the way right away. Frame rate was all over the place in this game. And if you're watching this and you're like, what are you talking about? Maybe go play Firewatch. This is all going to be spoilers.
Spoilercast, man.
There were lots of pop-ups and just jittering. And if you check out my episode of Worth It, you can see all of that. I literally fell through the floor. I got stuck on objects and had to fight my way off of them. Did you encounter any of that?
No. The only thing I had a problem with was it would hitch when it would like save.
Oh, hard crashes too. I had two hard crashes.
I had no crashes. It would just stutter. It'd be a little stutter.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, and you know, like the little disc icon that says that it's saving.
Yeah.
And that happens usually. I mean, the game is segmented into different days, so usually you have like one or two of those a day. But on the whole, it wasn't that bad. The only time where it got a little bit bogged down was in the very last sequence when the whole forest is on fire.
Yeah, no, that's when the frame rate really started chugging.
It dipped a little bit, but I didn't feel like it was inconsistent. It wasn't as smooth as it was before. It was just sort of, like not great. But it wasn't enough to like distract me from the experience. As far as glitches, like crashes, falling through the world, things like that, I experienced one thing, and it wasn't detrimental to gameplay in any way, shape, or form. In Firewatch, if you're listening, I'm not gonna give you. You already played it. So when you open up the boxes that have the like letters and stuff like that, the supply boxes, I opened up a supply box one time, and then I closed the lid, but there was a letter that had been pinned on the inside of the lid. Yeah, and the box closed, but the letter was still pinned in midair, and I was just like, "What the fuck is going on?" So then I grabbed it, and then I opened the box, and then I put it back, and it was fine.
Well, okay, that's all about the base gameplay there. We can get to that if we really want to.
That's the nuts and bolts. That's just
this is a spoiler cast. This game, the ending, a dead boy, a father hiding in the woods for over a year. What the hell? I'm just going to come right out and say it. That makes no goddamn sense to me. I mean, I understand the idea that this guy's been lurking around. There's that point where you find those ski-doos that have been ripped apart, and or whatever they call them, snowmobiles. Sure. He's ripped out all the guts of those. He's been rebuilding objects inside there. He broke into a base that was being run by a university, and he's been swapping out the notes on there. He was making fake notes about you to make you paranoid. Yeah. Do you think this giant conspiracy to make you paranoid is a bit elaborate?
Yeah, I think
for a single guy.
When you look at what the story is like thematically, it's about not properly dealing with your problems.
Yes,
basically, it's about being a bad person without being a bad person. Instead of dealing with things head on or being responsible, these are deeply flawed characters that do things with varying degrees of consequences.
The main character, Henry, of course, is running away from his wife's early onset dementia, which makes her not even really recognize him.
Sure. And then you have the secondary character, Delilah, who has some relationship issues of her own that are kind of murky.
Is that a Samson reference, a biblical reference, Samson and Delilah? That was my first instinct because of how loosey-goosey and she's ready to betray anyone at the drop of a hat. That felt like it was Delilah from the Book of Genesis.
It could be. I mean, I didn't read it as allegorical, but I wouldn't be surprised. So, and she's running from issues because, this is a job that she's held for over a decade, being a fire watcher.
Which is an easy job for her. She doesn't do anything.
Yeah, well, yeah, she doesn't do much of anything, and she's bad at her job. She's really bad. I mean, she lies on reports. She
drinks heavily.
She drinks heavily. She's not very good at her job.
She lies to the police.
Yeah, and then you have Ned, who's the other kind of central character in this story, And he's someone who we learn early on has some issues with PTSD. He was in Nam.
He's Charlie Sheen incarnate.
He's got a son, and so he's not necessarily a bad person. He's just very emotionally damaged. He doesn't know how to handle situations. And we find out that when his son died, presumably by accident, he sort of stayed in the woods and has been like kind of a crazy hermit.
Yeah, and the son is another character who's the only redeemable character really in this. He's just he's a big stupid nerd who wants to play with his dolls and his stupid little dragons and watch stupid cartoons, and his dad is trying to push him into being athletic and being out there and rock climbing, which eventually just results in his death because of course he doesn't know what he's doing. He's a weak kid, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, you kind of get that from the story as well. And I think like it's easy for me to buy the idea that this guy's out in the woods and kind of fucking with people by messing up with their stuff and taking their things, because
I believe
that makes perfect sense. So like the sort of narrative arc with the teenage shithead girls and him sort of fucking with their stuff, and then the girls thinking that it's you fucking with their stuff, and then that level of confusion, that works for me. What doesn't work is I don't know why Ned is so dead set on messing with you and Delilah.
Yeah, and why is he staying right there, right where the event happened? It's a huge forest, and he's staying, no exaggeration, like half a mile from the cave.
Yeah, where his son died, which is very strange to me.
And he didn't do anything to hide the kid? There's that pile of rocks. He didn't just brush the rocks over there just a little more?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. And I understand that we're led to believe that he's, mentally unstable. But at the same time, it's like I don't necessarily see his motivation to mess with you and Delilah and not the other Firewatch people. And
the worst excuse you could give is he's crazy. Don't you understand? His brain ain't working right.
So that doesn't completely
he's a lunatic. He's the lunatic fringe. That's why he's doing things that don't make sense.
Yeah. And it's just I don't know. And then the other thing from the story that I was just sort of like kind of cocking my head to the side, like, wait, what is this whole thing with the radio? And it's like they can't tap into our radio signals. And all I can think of is like when I was a kid and I had walkie-talkies, like the thing that you did was you would just scan through the stations until you came across like a trucker, and then you talk to truckers.
No, this is a period piece. They didn't understand the technology then, because this takes place in the mid '80s, and for no real reason other than they don't want you to have a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And
now I could. Well,
it's 1989. My mistake.
Yeah, and I think there's. I mean, the time period doesn't matter that much. Like, I guess they wanted to tell it, but this story still works if it takes place in 2016 because
don't get a signal here in the woods.
Yeah, you literally don't. So basically, by making it a period piece, they just avoid that stupid line of dialogue that movies and games seem to have whenever they want to isolate a character. But anyways, the point being here is maybe I don't understand how walkie-talkies work, but it's my understanding that you tune it to a signal. But maybe there is protected signals because I guess for like emergency service people, I can't like tune into police scanners or something like that. So maybe I'm missing something here, but it's like it's not explained well enough in a way that I felt comfortable with that. I was just like, aren't you just using fucking walkie-talkies?
Here's something that really isn't explained in this game. Who are you playing as? Are you playing as you? Or are you playing as Henry? And they do a very poor job of communicating that because from the get-go, they say, you see Julia. But then for the rest of the game, you are clearly not you. You're Henry.
Well, you okay.
That's my biggest issue. Is it seems like it's missing the perspective of second or third or first person. I don't understand it.
I think I'm going to disagree with you here. I didn't have an issue with that. I knew from the outset that I was Henry, even though it said you. Only because I've played a shitload of Twine games, and the beginning of this, like the whole prologue sequence, it felt like a Twine game to me. And I was thinking about what you were saying when we talked about the game last week before I had actually played it, where you're kind of making these choices in this prologue sequence, which is only a couple minutes long.
Sterile, blank screen.
Yeah.
You do this, you do that. And by the way, I played it twice. The decisions do not matter.
It didn't matter?
They do not. Well,
change your dog and everything?
Oh, I got the tiny dog. The dog got kicked. I got the big dog. Big dog ran away. They make no difference. You still walk by the beach every day instead of going over there. It makes no difference. You keep them. The only difference is you could possibly get a DUI before the game starts or not get a DUI.
I got a DUI.
Well, or not get a DUI.
Yeah.
That's... your choices make no difference at all. No impact. Even on the conversations in general. except for mentioning a DUI once.
I wonder about that because there's some dialogue tree options that seem very specific to the type of animal that you have and some life decisions you made, but we'll get into that. So with the prologue, it feels like kind of a Twine game.
Yeah.
It also reminded me a little bit of Depression Quest, where it sets up situations where you don't have an opportunity to sort of be the character you want to be. Henry's not a great guy. He's not. I mean, he's not a terrible person, but he makes bad decisions and he runs away from conflict. And that's sort of reflected in the choices that you have to make. So when you have a situation where it's just like, oh, well, you can say this dumb thing to your wife, or you can say this other dumb thing to your wife. You're like, damn, I don't want to say either of those things, but you don't have an option. When you're dealing with your wife's dementia, it's, you could put her in a home, or you can just, begrudgingly take care of her and resent her for it. And it's just like, oh shit, I don't want to do either of those things.
No, that's fine. Tough choices are great, but honestly, neither of them make a difference. Mm-hmm. When you keep her at the home, you get the DUI and she goes to Australia. You put her in the other home, she goes to Australia.
So the reason why, and I was of that line of thinking when I started playing, but as I got deeper into the game, I realized that this prologue doesn't necessarily exist to, shape your story and your experience.
Right.
It exists specifically for two reasons. One, characterization. Two, to drive home the secondary theme of isolation on top of making bad decisions in isolation. Because I was thinking about that too. I'm like, I wonder if there was a way they could have done this where, like you said, where it was more part of the game. Where I'm in a bar, I'm meeting Julia, but then once you introduce actual characters into this, and the game is very specific about how you interact with people. Once you actually introduce humans that you can see clearly into this game, you sort of lose that feeling of isolation. Now, I think another way to approach it, and I'm not saying this is how you should design your game, but it makes me wonder if these things sort of popped up diegetically naturally in the dialogue itself. Like, I learned about how I met Julia through my dialogue, because these are conversations that you have with Delilah. And the game, one thing the game does incredibly well is it feels very natural. Like, the conversations I was having, they're conversations that humans have.
They are. I have to disagree with you there. You have two fantastic voice actors, and they save that dialogue. That dialogue is awful.
Really? You really think so?
Oh, it's poorly written. It's forced. It's awkward.
I didn't feel that way at all. I mean, I was playing through it, and even when my girlfriend walked through and she was watching me play it for 5 minutes, she's just like, oh, they actually feel like people talking. It doesn't feel like video games.
Feel is the right word, and that all of that feeling comes from two very talented voice actors. I mean, especially the Ned dialogue, which has a great voice actor as well. That is just poorly written, and
how much Ned dialogue is there? He's just on the tape.
Yeah, well, it's a monologue. That's just it. I guess are very hard to perform.
I'm just talking about like the back and forth banter with Delilah. Like, there's this great thing that the game does that I really liked, and keep in mind, there's things about this game that I really like structurally, but it wasn't a home run for me. I'm not in love with this game. But there's this part where, because anything you see in the environment that's like anything other than like a mundane rock that you've seen 1,000 times, you can basically take your radio and just start talking to Delilah about it. And there's things like, I saw an outhouse, so I called her up, and it always says like, report outhouse. So I'm like, I report outhouse, and he's like, hey, like, found an outhouse here. And her response is totally not video games, because in video games it's supposed to be no. In video games, the answer is always yes, that's the outhouse. Blah 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 blah. And she goes, "It's an outhouse. You don't have to. If you have to take a shit, you don't have to call me and tell me about it." And I was just like, "Yeah, you're right."
And she also says like, "I pee everywhere I want to as well," and stuff like that. But I find it to still be video games. But this is 2016. We've advanced beyond that, and I feel like a lot of it is. It's just. The conversation is too aware of where it's ending. I don't know how to describe that, where it's like, well, I'm going to say something, you'll say something, and the conversation's over. It doesn't feel, when you just look at the writing, it's not very natural. It feels very rehearsed. It's very plain. And I especially for two strangers, their growth is nowhere in that dialogue. It's very poorly written. However, the actor, by using tone, is what really saves that. It's the performances.
I don't
would
know.
say.
I mean, the performances are great, but
They're great.
I did not have any issues with the writing at all. And I guess, that's just difference of opinion. That's fine.
No, I'm right. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know.
But even if the dialogue, I'd say goes real haywire when you start choosing different options in the dialogue. Because like I said, I played through it twice. No impact. Whatever you do, you either talk about your wife or you don't talk about your wife. And if you don't talk about your wife, it results in nothing. She'll just talk about her husband or ex-husband, boyfriend, whatever his name is, and you just won't talk about your thing. You really don't learn anything else about each other. And even when you go to the place, it's like, we should burn this place down. No, let's not. Okay, we won't. Oh my goodness, the fire started. Anyway, well, fine. Let's burn the place down. Maybe not. Okay. What? Why would you even put the option? They put the options there just for you to not do anything, which would be fine if there was a different way of phrasing it. But having a definite yes and a definite no, that's my biggest issue.
I can see that. I think some of the more action-driven routes that you can take, I wish they would have had more of an impact on, I don't know, day-to-day. But the game ends... A lot of the things I've read about this since playing through it, people seem to have big problems with the ending. It's just like, well, they cast aside the growing relationship between Henry and Delilah, and it's like, well... Their growing relationship is secondary from the fact that this is a game about people running away from problems. And we don't know what Delilah's love life is like because there's conflicting information about where she's at. We know you have a very complex love life. So it's not like you can't have a definitive, oh, I'll never see you again, or oh, come live with me in Boulder, Colorado. That doesn't work. Neither of those work. So basically... and people say, oh, well, they're still the same people they were at the beginning. It's like, well, because they're still working through things. Yeah,
I could get past that if the plot made any sort of sense with this guy jumping around woods being, I don't know, super sneaky to trick two people, which is bonkers.
Yeah, I don't know what his end game is.
Because he's mentally unstable. And to get to my point about the dialogue, just if I want to touch on once again, just listen to the way you were just talking there. How you were saying things like, they're all like this or all like that. That's how people talk. That's my problem with the dialogue is it's just overly snarky. Of course they have a one-liner because they've prepared the previous sentence to fit into that one-liner too precisely. It feels like a wannabe Joss Whedon is kind of what the
really?
vibe.
That's the vibe you got from it?
Yeah, because there's just these points where, she's always sarcastic and you're sarcastic. She's like, so that's what it feels like. And I give all the praise in the world to that voice acting. I think it's great. I think the music's okay. I think there's some really touching music. I do like the way that the world is designed and how you adapt to it and become more familiar with the way that the canyon connects up to the base. I'm not looking for gameplay. I'm not looking for any of that type of stuff. I'm just looking for some really good dialogue. I mean, I'm a fan of like these like Waiting for Godot, very minimalist plays where it's just an elaborate conversation. I like good dialogue and conversation. I know Quentin Tarantino gets a lot of praise for the way he does dialogue. His dialogue's very snappy. It's kind of formulaic, but in a way that's very knowing. That's what makes it good. And then you have more naturalistic dialogue like you'd see from like a Neil Simon, which is still very humorous. This right here, and I know it's comparing it to those is unfair, but just right here feels like ABC Movie of the Week kind of dialogue where
I don't
hate
think
to
it's
keep touching on that, but that really is the core elements of this game are those conversations. That's what this game is built around.
Sure.
More so than even the ending.
Yeah,
the ending doesn't matter.
It's about conversation and just sort of the looming mystery and whether or not these characters are going to suffer for their bad decisions.
Did we need a mystery at all? That's the most frustrating part.
I think so because when you have two characters who routinely make bad decisions and run away from them and sort of have grown content in making small bad decisions,
right.
You need to introduce some sort of stakes. And I think Ned's sort of seam in this plot makes our characters really look at what they're doing with themselves and whether or not these things that they're just like, oh, I'm just going to brush this off. It's whatever.
I mean,
like what are the consequences of that? So I think the Ned thing could have worked a lot better than it did. It just felt like they kind of whiffed on that. But I see the bigger vision here, and I understand where it fits in as a puzzle piece. But it just didn't completely develop. It was sort of half baked.
You got two teenage girls that go missing. Boom, there's your plot. This whole Ned scenario is bonkers to me. The idea that these girls will go missing. Should we tell the police? Should we not tell the police? That is natural. That's your core. That's real and relatable and understandable. Because they've been drinking and all that type of stuff. That's a real plot that they could have built out. And instead it becomes this shadow mystery, Deus Ex Machina kind of shit.
And even, I guess, if you...
And it's a Scooby-Doo episode. Let's be honest. It was old man Ned the whole time. I mean, that's a problem for me.
Yeah. Again... Ned is fine because Ned's actions and what he does is like the ultimate. If you are complacent and you continue to make bad decisions and don't stop and like have a dialogue with yourself and try and figure out the best course of moving forward, you can end up like Ned. Like there's varying degrees of this, and we see that with each of the characters, like what the different effects of their actions are. So the Ned character can work, but I don't see... I agree with you that it's just like the fact that the big reveal in the game's final act is like Ned's been fucking with you the whole time, and here's his like crazy person den.
You know what? I gotta say, they did not earn a dead child. They did not earn murdering a child in that game.
Yeah, or at least that one. Maybe if they murdered one of the teen girls. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of little parts that don't completely come together. So when I see a game like Firewatch... Basically, my thought on it was, you know what? I'm really glad I said like this. It was.
Oh yeah, it's entertaining.
Yeah, it's a good game to sit through.
Yeah. Sure.
And I want to see what the studio does next. Like that is compelling to me.
Yeah.
And I like the world that they put me in. It was nice to be in this like kind of like serene sort of pastoral place, but with this looming fire in the distance. And metaphorically, it works because I think the woods are a great place to tell a story of not only of isolation, but of running away from your problems.
Absolutely.
So, like there's so many little pieces of this that worked really well for me. But then the big picture, when you take a step back from it, you're like, they just... good effort, but I did knock it out of the park.
There just was... When I saw the dead kid, I was already feeling nothing, and I felt nothing, and I moved on. Like, I was just like, you guys... It was like, I need more from you guys. Because there's this whole thing about... I don't know if you've ever heard about this. Like, they did a study one time about the way that people talk to each other when they're in a car together, and the way they talk to each other over the phone while one person is driving. And it was a really interesting study because they talked about how you feel the motion together. How when someone cuts in front of you, you'll probably stop talking, allowing the driver to focus and then continue. Or whereas someone's on the phone, it's very different. Delilah doesn't feel like she's on the phone. It's very weird. She feels like she's right there next to him. And I have an issue with that where there's not enough natural... Henry's behavior doesn't feel very natural to me during all of this. Delilah can be as selfish as she wants. That's fine, but she often feels like she's right there with him and he's right there with her. And you could say emotions. That's fine. But actually, just like scientifically, it does not feel right. I know it sounds like I'm really reaching there, but that's something that doesn't work. This is an opportunity for, again, to talk about how we communicate long distance when we can only hear each other's voice. And I do not feel it capitalizes on that in any way. Or maybe Henry could lie to her or something like that. He doesn't really have any opportunities to lie to her. If you lie to her, she goes, yeah, right, I don't believe you. It's bonkers. They even give you the opportunity to lie or be sarcastic or be serious because she responds. It's almost, my name is Commander Shepard and this is my favorite thing on the city. It's just like that where it's blanket statements.
Sure. So I don't know, a lot of potential here, and it's something where I would say if you're interested in this game, if you like story-driven games without combat, if you're a fan of your Gone Homes and your whatnots, yeah, definitely. This is a game you should play. I'm just saying, temper your expectations. This isn't game of the year. This isn't.
Oh no,
this doesn't have the impact of Gone Home, where you put down the controller after you're done. You're like, oh wow,
never.
But I will say, I'm glad. This game never felt like Gone Home to me, and I think this. I haven't played Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, but
I would say Everybody's Gone to the Rapture much better than this, and I highly recommend you do.
It's on my to play list. I'm glad that. Even though I know you said last week and before that you're sort of getting fatigued in these types of games.
Yeah.
I for me at least, this didn't feel like Gone Home to me. Gone Home doesn't feel like Dear Esther to me. Like each of these games, they have very distinct different feelings and they play with the mechanics in different ways, which I really appreciate. And I read a great piece, it was on Killscreen, I think, where they actually they compared these walking simulators or whatever to the 90s Danish film movement Dogme 95,
okay,
where instead of creating a genre, it's more of a philosophy.
Absolutely.
Because you have these people who are like, okay, we want you to move about in a semi-confined space where we can tell a story and it's about human interaction. So it's more about like a guiding principle than it is a subgenre, which I think is a really good way to think about these games.
Don't get me wrong. I enjoy films like Solaris and Stalker and bizarre Russian long films that don't really add up to much. I agree, and that's fine. But I liked running around and picking up stuff. I didn't like the characters' interactions. Sure. And it's not the case of I didn't like the characters. I want them to be super cool and talk about how they like smoking cigarettes and punching people. But I needed more from them. I do applaud the developers for trying. Putting out a game is very difficult. And especially one that apparently is very personal to these people. I applaud them for that. I did not like the overall results. But you know what? At the end of the day, I think more people should play it. I have a number of problems with it. I did a worth it video. I said it was worth it. And I stand by that most people will be entertained while they play this and will accept that. But beyond that, for me, it's kind of like we need to bring the art of dialogue and storytelling up a lot farther in video games. Sure. And you could say that across the board, but for a game devoted to that craft, it's got to get better.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's easier to put a game like this under the microscope in terms of story and dialogue because other games like Gears of War, no one's gonna I mean, people do readings of games like Gears of War and how their story and dialogue works, but it's easier to ignore that when everything's blowing up all around you. But when you shift that focus, it becomes much more important.
But I expect more out of these games because Gears of War is simply an avatar for the player. Whereas this needs to create character. And, we've definitely seen some really big highlights in video game storytelling, including Rise of the Tomb Raider, which I really enjoyed, including Last of Us, including, obviously, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture and Gone Home.
And if you like games like this, too, there's plenty of ones out there that have gone sort of underplayed. So the studio Tale of Tales, they made a game called Sunset that's really cool.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
They also made The Path, which came out in like 2007, and that's a third-person game, but it's sort of the proto walking simulator, if you will. Obviously, the games by the Chinese Room, all worth checking out. There's all kinds of stuff. Just take a deep dive into itch.io and Steam and just go crazy.
You will go crazy. All right, crazy. Last thing before we get out of here. 0 through 10, what would you give this?
Oh,
I'm
Jesus,
kidding. I'm kidding.
Kill you.
But everybody definitely check out Firewatch because I feel that no matter if you like it or if you don't, I would say it's worth it simply because you won't walk away neutral. That will do it for this Spoilercast of Firewatch. Stay tuned. We'll have another episode of Pressurecast out on Monday. Check out all the videos. You can check out my episode of Worth It, and definitely go to Optimism Vaccine to check out Steve Cuff's amazing writing, which maybe you'll write about this subject, perhaps, maybe one day.
You never know.
All right, thank you for watching. See you next time.